Welcome back. Panelists here. Tom Brokaw, Grand Poobah of NBC News here. Eliana Johnson of Politico, Reid, host of MSNBC's AM Joy, and always a joy on here. And Hugh Hewitt, host on the Salem Radio Network. All right, Hugh. I'm gonna start with you because this is what the Washington Examiner headline is. GOP cave on Obamacare repeal is the biggest broken promise in political history. It was the top of, I believe, Phil Klein's analysis. Is he right?
No, it's overstated. We had a very good week with Neil Gorsuch. He's going to change the balance of the Supreme Court for 30 years. And so President Trump has a huge win to put on the table this week. It was a big loss. But I agree with the autopsy that Director Mulvaney just put out there. That loss isn't on the president. It isn't on Paul Ryan. It is on the Area 51 subcaucus of the Freedom Caucus, which believes in legislative flying saucers that ignore the Senate and the Senate rules and the reconciliation rules. They own the loss, nobody else.
Tom?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the entire Republican side of the House for 7 years has been screaming about repealing Obamacare. So they come up with a plan that they do in the middle of the night, and they shove it in front of the House and say, take it or leave it. The president buys into that. What they created really was a circular firing squad, and the command was ready, fire, aim. And we're all involved in the politics. But out in America today, people who have serious or even moderate health problems are wondering, where do I go from here? It's so broken in Washington, it's not going to get anything done.
But before you guys jump in, we did some voter interviews over the last couple of days. There was one that really stood out to me. I'm going to play it here from a woman in Wichita, a Trump voter. Listen to this.
You cannot slam something so incredibly layered and complex together in that many days. I don't care how many people are working on it. You cannot do it. It took them so much longer to craft ACA, and it still isn't correct. There has to be a balance.
You know, she gets it.
Well, one thing I don't think has been sufficiently appreciated is that the Democrats expended an amount of political capital to pass Obamacare. It took 13 months to craft the law. President Obama talked about it incessantly. He was mocked by Republicans for pounding away at it. Democrats lost 63 seats in Congress, 6 seats in the Senate. I don't know if Republicans were mentally prepared, if they cared about it so much, to expend that kind of political capital and to know, okay, precisely because they're doing something unprecedented, taking away an entitlement, we might lose the House, we might lose the Senate for doing this. Do they care about it that much? I'm not sure.
But that's the problem. I think that it was a revelatory process. I thought that graphic that you put up that showed the number of legislative days devoted to all of these previous attempts at legislation, you know, where your time is spent, that's where your passion is. And I think the problem for Republicans is that this 17-day odyssey revealed 3 things that are not good for them. Number one, that the zeal was really just about taking this thing that Obama did away, which a lot of people on the Democratic side perceive, that repeal and replace is about taking away Obama's signature achievement, but that affirmatively, what did they want to do? Republicans have spent the last 30, 40 years trying to replace this image of callousness toward the poor, of callousness toward the elderly, with this idea of compassionate conservatism. That was whisked away over this process. There was a cruelty to this bill that really was even apparent to conservative voters, to Republican voters, who were shocked at the cruelty. And the third thing, and the president has kind of hinted at this too, this was a tax cut. This was an attempt to jam through a giant tax cut for the wealthy to set the stage for tax reform, which is another tax cut.
Charlie Dent said that, Hugh. He basically said this was just all about trying to finance a $2 trillion tax cut, hoping that they could make it deficit neutral.
Charlie, who is a friend of mine, lives in a marginal district. He has to be very careful of every vote. And the half of the Freedom Caucus that killed this live in very safe red districts. Obamacare is the timeshare that the Democrats bought that they cannot admit the cost of, that they keep telling themselves was a good idea. A death spiral. Joy and I have had many disagreements about that, but it isn't a death spiral.
It's not the definition of an economic death spiral.
The New York Times yesterday pointed out that there are the president of Aetna, that you will lose coverage in many places in America for everyone, and that is to me a death spiral for those people. Joy disagrees. I know she should jump in here,
but I appreciate her reticence.
Take Aetna's word for it, because we know that Aetna lied. We had already a federal judge say that they lied. Aetna wanted to do a merger with Humana. They were told no. They pulled out for other reasons. Insurance companies raise premiums. It's what they do. That's what they're in business to do. But the Congressional Budget Office has made it quite clear the Affordable Care Act is not collapsing, not in a death spiral, just not.
I want to quickly get to Paul Ryan here, because it is there a subtle palace intrigue campaign going on with some people in this White House to undermine Paul Ryan.
I don't know about that, but I was stunned when Paul Ryan, who had been in this town for a long time, said at the end of the process, well, there is a difference between being an opposition party and a majority party. Duh. You know, and they've been the majority party for now their 4th term in Congress. And then he also said it's really complicated, health care. And to come to the American people and 60 days into this administration and say, well, we've learned that it's complicated, and by the way, we didn't realize the difference between being an opposition party and being a majority party. I think that takes a lot of his credibility away from him, quite honestly.
Yeah. And can we comment on Mick Mulvaney essentially saying the Tea Party, which is what the Freedom Caucus is, they're the establishment? Yeah. He essentially called them the special interest establishment.
Well, I think,
that's odd.
You know, when you play the blame game here, you talk about Paul Ryan. I think it's important to note, how does he roll out a bill that not one conservative healthcare policy expert supports? Right. This really was a bill without a core constituency of supporters behind it, which I think was its essential problem. Though I know, you know, he wants to blame the partiers, but how do you explain that?
No, not the Tea Partiers. The Area 51. I will never vote for anything that isn't perfect, people.
Wow.
It doesn't
well, but
exist. It's
legislation.
legislation.
No support. You know, I think that's hard to reconcile.
I'm going to close the loop here with just one comment, which came from a strategist quoted in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, which said Ryan is probably safe as Speaker because nobody particularly wants to be Henry VIII's next wife. I'm going to pause it there. Coming up.